George McGregor. I live in Southport, 50 years old. Well, growing up in Newcastle was, in the 60s in particular, was interesting. It was a small mining community. It was an area of the country which was dominated by heavy industry. Lots of small communities, lots of small mining communities, and absolute allegiance to Newcastle United was very much to the fore there. My family have got football running through its roots way back through generations. I remember my uncles, my father, my mother, we all used to go to the home matches of Newcastle United and very occasionally go to Berwick Rangers football matches. All of my uncles played amateur football at a reasonable standard. My grandfather played at a very good standard in the North East, and he also played professionally as well. I remember playing football in the streets with lads of my own age and some lads who were considerably older. We used 2 bins for football goals, and it was literally on the concrete and tarmac roads. Sometimes not even using a ball. Sometimes, you know, it was a tin or bits of paper wrapped up, stuff like that. Anything we could use to kick around to simulate a game of football. The first match I ever went to was a Newcastle United home game. I have a strong suspicion that it was Newcastle versus Southampton, and I've also got a strong suspicion it was 1966. Probably the second season that Newcastle United had come back into the old First Division from the Second Division. All I remember about being taken to the game is the massive people going into the ground, being carried and pushed through this metal turnstile, sat on one of the old concrete crush barriers. I think we went every home game after that. The only games that my dad wouldn't take me to were the derby games against Sunderland, principally because of there were 50 or 60,000 people in the ground, so it was very crushed. But even in the 1960s, before the popularity of football hooliganism, there were quite often some tasty incidents in there as well. So I didn't get to go and see those. I played as an associate schoolboy at Sheffield United, and then at Lincoln for a while as a student. I remember my dad, who had incidentally been working nights, drove me from where we used to live in Nottingham to Sheffield in the morning. I remember turning up in the office of the youth team manager, a guy called John Shaw. I remember asking my dad, said, how did you get up here? And my dad said, I drove. And he said, that must have cost you quite a bit in petrol. And my dad said, that's not an issue. I wanted to come up and watch my lad play in any case. And the manager then said, no, we'd like to give you some petrol money for this. And my dad again tried to refuse this. And out of the pocket of the youth team manager came what I can only say at the time was a massive roll of notes held together by an elastic band, and the manager said to my dad, who was also called George, he said, George, no, we'd like to give you some petrol money. And he took the elastic band off and started flicking, I think it was £5 and £10 notes, and I don't think either of us had seen that much cash in our entire lives. And I can't remember how much was handed to my dad, but it was a reasonable amount. It was certainly as much, I would say, as a week's wages for my dad. I remember having a very strong game at one stage, and Martin O'Neill was handing out the prizes, and he mentioned me by name, and that was really nice. I felt really good about that. Being a goalkeeper, principally, my earliest idol was obviously Gordon Banks. Growing up in the 60s, England goalkeeper, fantastic agility, anticipation. I think they still replay that save he made in 1970 from Pele, the header, completely down to the bottom right-hand corner somehow. And Banks was not a small guy. He was about 6'1", and he still had the agility to get down there to flip it up across the bar. And genuinely, there are still many who now say that they've never seen a better save, and that was 40 years ago almost. My career at Holbank started where I was invited to do a training session, and I remember doing some shooting practice with the lads where I was in goal, and I must have stopped a fair number of them because they asked me if I would play in goal the next game, which I think took place on one of the filthiest Sunday mornings I can ever remember. The pitch was either mud or puddles and not much grass in between. We won 4-2 and it seemed to go reasonably well, and I played ever since. It's rekindled my enthusiasm for playing football, and it's given me a great sense of enjoyment. I've still been able to contribute to the team. I've been playing for 2 years now. Started to watch, and my feet started to get very twitchy. I ended up doing a training session with them, and a couple of weeks later was asked if I could fill in and play for a while, and I've really not stopped playing since then. The team, who were between, I would say, 18 and 21 in the main, actually start to grow up this season, both in terms of their physical capabilities and in their understanding of how each of them makes a contribution to the team, and I think that's happened. That we've played better as a team this year, and that augurs well for the second half of the season. I can see it coming to an end for me fairly soon. Possibly end of this season or the next season will be the last season I'll have. And it would be nice for me to actually help Holbank find another goalkeeper, another 19, 20-year-old goalkeeper who I can work with, coach, support and help develop.
Trigger me no press people button. Nobody chat come face me with something. Like how me have 22 in a me something. Then I feel so forget the next 1,000 fool. Press trigger me no press people button. Nobody chat come face me with something.